Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Bubble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we are once again very fortunate to have with us a regular guest on the Gaggle, and of course, a regular guest on RT's Crosstalk, Dmitry Babich. And Dima, last time you were here, which was really just only a few weeks ago, we were talking about the arrest of the number two in the Russian Defense Ministry. It was this Timur Ivanov, and we were obviously wondering, what does this mean, and what does it portend? And maybe we got an answer in the last 24 hours with the removal of Sergei Shoigu as defense minister, his transfer to be head of Russia's Security Council, and the dismissal of Nikolai Patrushev, at least temporarily. He hasn't got another job. Maybe he'll get another one. But anyway, Shoigu is out, and he's been replaced by Andrei Belousov, white mustache. And so, and we're trying to figure out, obviously, what does this mean? Because Belousov is also a man with no military background. He's an economist. So I'll throw it over to you. Whichever angle you want to take up, Dima. What do you think?
Well, let's start with the critics of that decision. Of course, even if you listen to the state media, I'm not talking about lots of small YouTube channels. You hear that certain military people are not happy, and it is quite obvious. The military people, they always prefer one of their own to be heading the Ministry of Defense. Let's make it clear to those of our listeners who are not very knowledgeable in this sphere. Actually, the actual fighting is done by the head of the general staff, by the generals, by the marshals, and by the commander-in-chief. The Ministry of Defense is responsible for kind of making the link between the front and the military industry. And I think it was Putin's policy to make civilians, the ministers of defense. Look, even Shoigu, despite the image of a kind of a militarist that the Western media is trying to create, he's not a military man by his background. He never served in the army. He is a construction engineer by education. Yes, for a long time, almost 30 years, he was the head of the emergencies ministry, which was kind of militarized. These are the people who are responsible for helping people in critical situations, such as floods, fires, technological disasters.
And that's where he got a lot of his notoriety and popularity, because these were like the men to the rescue, and they were portrayed that way in the media a lot.
Exactly. And I think, as you know, Putin usually awards the people who do services to the country and sometimes to him. Shoigu was very important in the year 2000, when basically it was not clear if Yeltsin's handpicked successor, which was Putin, will gain the election, or maybe the so-called fatherland, all Russia, the party created by the Moscow mayor Lushkov and the former prime minister Primakov, they were seen as a powerful political force that could basically take the reins of power. So Shoigu was chosen by the establishment, probably by the surrounding of Yeltsin, as the man around whom this new party, Unity, it was just called Unity, was created. And he was very successful in that image. Basically, if you look at Shoigu, I followed his career, I saw lots of his interviews. He's not an intellectual. He is not a man of huge visions, He is a very good administrator, quite able to operate in critical situations, very well familiar with all sorts of technical solutions. Well, because when you are dealing with emergencies, you learn to find the people who know how a certain thing operates in order to remove the terrible consequences.
Well, Dima, you're giving all the positive qualities of Shoigu, which I've heard before. So why was he replaced?
Well, obviously, now that we are moving in the untrodden paths with this war, you obviously need an intellectual. You need a man with vision to head.
Well, let me ask it differently before we get to that and talk about the qualities of this new person. But you explained to us, and it's always been my understanding, is that the defense minister is very much a very technocratic position, a guy that gets things done. How did the military, the generals, the marshals that you said, how did they view him? Was Shoigu a favorite son of theirs?
Well,
because it wasn't my impression that was the case.
No, compared to his predecessor, Anatoly Sergei, Shoigu was popular among the military. Okay. Everything is understood in context, right? In comparison. So the military hated Anatoly Sergei, who headed Shoigu headed the defense ministry for 12 years between 2012 and 2024. And before him, for 5 years, the defense ministry was headed by Anatoly Sergei, who was very civilian. Now, by the way, Sergei served in that. So he knew all the idiocies. He knew all the absurds that were typical of the Soviet army. And he came to clean them up as a person who experienced it himself, right? So basically, the military criticized Sergei a lot. A lot of dirt was thrown to him retrospectively. But actually, if you look at the results of Sergei's work, they were very impressive. It was after Sergei's reform that the Russian army was successful, partially successful in Georgia. You remember, 2008. That it was very successful in Syria in 2015, 2016. And, until this huge special military operation, it was basically a chain of successes. Sergei basically did what he was asked to do, that is to create a leaner, meaner army that could be used in small conflicts. No one in the 2000s and 2010s expected the global conflict with a country like Ukraine, with a huge military force, or or with NATO. We were preparing for small conflicts, like the one in Syria, the one in Georgia, preferably short one. So basically, when Sergei took the reins of power in 2007, after many years of being run by generals and military people, the army was turning into a social institution for poor, elderly people, something that would allow you to sustain your existence even after you seem to cease to be battle ready. You just want, to survive and to have a nice.
George, if it's okay with you, what do you think? How would you correlate the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Shoigu's leadership of the defense ministry?
I would say that Shoigu, he developed on the good things that Sergei did, which was primarily that military people, the soldiers and officers, they should be preparing for a war, not having, physical exercises or, living for their own problems, like feeding themselves or building something, especially for the officers, right?
Yeah,
he made
the dacha scandals.
Exactly. Well, I think the dacha stopped to be built back in the 90s, but there were also other things, like the army was existing for itself in many ways. There were many people, but it was a system which turned on itself and which was not preparing to fight anymore. So Sergei made them smaller. He made them work for being battle ready and not for some abstract well-being of the officers. And Shoigu preserved that heritage, but obviously it looks like in the last few months, maybe, it became apparent that the army needs faster introduction of new weapons, new technologies.
But
Here
Dima,
you
I mean,
needed someone like
but
someone
Dima,
like
one of the criticisms that have been made about Shoigu and the SMO was that in fact he adopted the Western way of fighting, which wasn't really suitable for this kind of operation in Ukraine. He abandoned the Soviet method. The Soviet method would, I think, would have been much more successful, which would have been mass attacks rather than these kind of
steamroller.
Exactly. That's how the Soviets were successful. The Russians abandoned the Soviet system, adopted the American style of fighting, which is these small units, mobile, and so on. But that wasn't really suitable for the kind of vast military operation that was necessary in Ukraine. I think that's really where the criticism of Shoigu has been.
Well, I understand. I think basically the practice of that military operation, it showed that actually no one knew the truth and no one was really prepared, because the Western methods of leading war, I think a lot of them were based on the experience of the Gulf War, which turned out to be very deceptive. Like the idea was that you would just destroy your opponent at a distance using drones, planes, and missiles. And the reality is that all of these very advanced weapons, they're very expensive. There are never enough of them just because they're so expensive. So basically, the old Soviet munitions and the old Soviet weapons were not bad. They should be used. They are used. They are helpful. Yes, advanced Western weapons are also good to use, but obviously in modern war, you can use this kind of mobile, fast-moving tactics against the opponent, which is much weaker than you. Basically, the Western troops were trained to fight so-called insurgents, who were always at a disadvantage. They were outnumbered, outgunned. They usually were headed by people like Osama bin Laden or the other so-called field commanders. So fighting a modern army with Western instructors, which is the Ukrainian army after 10 years of preparation for the war, it turned out to be a very difficult task. So I don't agree with people who say that, Putin expected Shoigu to be successful in the first month, first 2 weeks. That didn't work. So now Putin is punishing Shoigu. No, I think that when the special military operation started, no one expected all the difficulties and no one could foresee them. I think the Western specialists, Russian specialists, we now have such a huge experience that even lower rank officers now are more professional than they were in 2022.
Dima Peskov, the press secretary for Putin, he said a number of interesting things. One thing that was highlighted is that Russia, what it spends to GDP on defense is up to about now 6.7%, which is very close to what it was during the Soviet era, about 7-something%. And then he talked about modern technologies and new ideas and all of that. So put that on one side, or maybe just on the top line is a lot of money is going into the Defense Department. Okay. And the last time we convened, we talked about this corruption scandal that was very close to Shoigu. Put those two pieces together for us.
Well, corruption, I just have no exact information, but there were always rumors that there were huge money poured into the emergencies ministry, and then there was huge money poured into defense ministry. So something like that could happen. It could be true. Let's not be naive about it. But I don't think it's the main reason. Because
yeah, but it seems it's I mean, I don't know. It's part of public lore that, Shoigu is Putin's Siberian hiking partner. They like to hype that up and all of that. And at least publicly, it looked like they had a very warm relationship. And so you have to find if Putin, and obviously he feels a change was needed, and he basically was saying to we need to clean house here, and that includes includes you.
That's right. So the question is then, what does this change mean? Because you bring in an economist. That doesn't sound like you're going to change your military strategy.
Well, a very accomplished economist.
It sounds like you want to save some money. I mean, you want to change the procurement process, that kind of stuff, like when they brought in Robert McNamara as the Pentagon chief under Kennedy. We're going to change the procurement process. Well, that was a disaster. But anyway,
well, again, let's repeat what we said before, what we established. The actual fighting is not done by the Ministry of Defense. It's the head of the general staff, it's the generals, so they decide these things. As for the philosophy of the war, the philosophy of the strategy of procuring arms to the army, well, in that sense, Belarus was very successful. Belarus, at least that's the official information now, was responsible.
To remind everyone, he's the successor. He's been nominated to be successor to Shoigu.
Yeah. He was preparing Russia for the Western sanctions, and that work has been done very well. Definitely better than preparation for the actual military operation. And even before the relations between Russia and the West soured in 2014, I remember that Belarus was always mentioned as the alternative economic thinker. The majority was always with the liberals, with people like Nabiullina, people like Yasin. They all spoke in favor of globalization. Well, I think both China and Russia dreamed of participating in that big common globalization, expecting it to be somehow, to their advantage, that sooner or later the West would understand the pros and cons. But actually, the West cracked up to be extremely stupid and ideological. So the West destroyed this huge, great project of general globalization. So now it's clear that we're going to have several globalizations. We're going to have a Russian, Chinese globalization. We're going to have ASEAN globalization. And of course, the Western globalization will not go away. The United States and their allies will build their systems.
Over the years, again, Shoigu had a very high profile. I always felt that people had a lot of respect for him, mostly because of the emergencies ministry, not his job at the defense ministry. That's what people would talk about. I know it's early hours and all this, but what is your sense of public opinion? And has anybody in the military anonymously, unofficially reacted to this news?
No, those military who have access to media, such as Colonel Baronets, for example, they didn't hide that they were not happy. Well, as usual, the military were not happy when Serdyukov came to reform them in 2007. They had everything neatly organized between themselves. They adapted to even when the army was critically underfunded. This is the human way. People always prefer the old ways. They are adapted to the old bosses. They know how to deal with them. They know how to survive. So when the new boss comes and he says, I'm going to pay you more, but you're going to work in a different way, and this guy, I'm not going to pay at all, I'm going to give him his pension and he will have to leave, this is always dramatic. This is always opposed. So when the special military operation got into trouble and it became apparent that it's not going to be a expedition, it's going to be a fight with long front lines, with lots of people participating, immediately you had the military saying, I told you so. We needed these divisions. We needed these huge numbers of soldiers. It's too bad, that that Serdyukov trashed this Soviet system. Well, I'm not sure they would be able to hold the front lines that long with the troops and with the system that they had in 2007. I just don't believe. Let me remind you that in Chechnya, especially during the beginning in 1995, the Russian army revealed itself to be very, very weak, with many problems.
It was humiliated. It was humiliated. Let's use the word.
It was first reformed in 1998 by the military themselves, by Minister Rodionov, who was a military man. So it showed itself much better in 2000 and 2001, crushing the remnants of Chechen insurgency. But obviously, the real reform started in 2007. So I think the philosophy of Putin's attitude to the military remained the same, that military cannot reform themselves. That you need someone from outside come and give them the tools. I mean, the military should be fighting. That's their job, in the trenches, on the front line, they take decisions. But you need someone like Belarusov to help them get all the necessary munitions, arms to organize the whole system.
Yeah.
So Dima,
again.
Do you expect any major changes as a result of this Belarusov taking over? Do we now expect anything to change as to Russia's strategy in Ukraine, or even Russia in terms of mobilization or spending more on military? I mean, do you expect any changes along those lines?
Well, I think there will be more cohesion between the economy and the army. And maybe there will be some people replaced in the military establishment too. But in general, when people told me, oh, Shoigu can be Putin's successor as the president, I was always terrified at this thought, because
I heard it a lot. Yeah,
Shoigu was not and is not an intellectual. He is a very, very good administrator. You set him the task, he fulfilled it. But himself setting the task, sometimes he said things which were not worthy of a person of his stature. It didn't mean that he was not worthy of his position of the minister, but it certainly meant he was not worthy of his position, of a possible position as a president. The president should not have should not fantasize.
Well, I met him, and I'll tell you, everyone, he's a very gruff person, a man of very few words, and a chain smoker.
and
one right after another. After it was wow.
And he's very direct. Even when he worked as the emergency minister, his style was, he came to a certain disaster area. People there started saying, we have this problem, that problem, you should understand us. He always said, if something terrible didn't happen here because you made a mistake, we wouldn't be here. So listen to us and understand, that you are responsible. We're going to deal with the problem first, then we'll find out who is to blame. But he's very direct, very, in that sense, very matter of fact. But I didn't see him as someone who can be the president, who can
Dima, I saw today an excerpt from a recent interview of Putin's, and I don't know whether you've seen it and whether it's been confirmed as true. Maybe it's a fake. Putin said in this interview, which has seemed very strange, that Shoigu opposed the Crimean takeover back in 2014. Have you seen this?
No, but it's very possible. It's very possible. A lot of people did not expect Putin to make that move. And but
it's strange for Putin to suddenly disclose this, 10 years on, that Shoigu opposed the takeover of Crimea.
George, do you have any idea when this?
Let's check it.
I don't know. That's why I was thinking.
Do you remember the date? Do you remember the date?
It didn't have a date. It didn't have. There was no date. It said it's recent, and I looked on the Kremlin website. I didn't find it, but they don't publish all the interviews. So, but that's just all I saw. I'll try and look for some more confirmation.
Well, I mean, let's check it, because basically it is not Shoigu's way to oppose certain ideas openly. There are officials in Russia, not many of them left, who can do it, and Putin tolerates it sometimes. But Shoigu's way would be to tell Putin in person, okay, maybe we shouldn't do it. Do you see how difficult it is going to be? Did you calculate all the consequences? And of course, Putin understood it's going to be difficult. And of course, Putin understood that others might be opposed to it. Let me remind you that several Russian banks and even mobile phone companies did not come to Crimea. In the next 10 years, Sberbank was very unwilling to come to Crimea. They were afraid of sanctions. And Putin kind of tolerated this because he kind of understood, okay, I see we did something unexpected. I understand that you need to adapt to it. It may take years. I understand you don't want to lose money. Okay, I can wait. But look, if Crimea had been a base for a NATO Navy, that would create such a strategic threat to Russia that we wouldn't be able to deal with it during the next 50 years.
I know we're running out of time, Dima. Real quickly here. What kind of signal does this change portend? Again, looking at some of the comments that Peskov gave to the media, and what really stuck out in my mind is more efficiency, more budgetary budget is going to the military, new ideas, innovative ideas. Is this appointment foreshadowing not only is Ukraine on our plate right now, but Russia has to significantly rethink its strategic vision, what it means to be secure, and its relationship vis-a-vis the West. It sounds like kind of the long march. That's what I feel, Dima.
Well, I just expect a return of intellect, return of intellectualism into the top echelons of Russian power. Because in the last few years, I think there was too much of an accent on administrators. Like, compare the educations. Shoigu is a construction engineer. He got his education at the Krasnoyarsk Construction Institute. I have all respect for that, but Belousov graduated from MGU, Moscow State University. He is a specialist in cybernetics and economy. That's a different caliber of a public office.
Well, historically, Dima, intellectuals have never been always that good for Russia, but I get your point. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not an intellectual in the old sense, someone who who is romantic and who thinks about dreams and world literature. No, we need someone who understands the way the economy works and someone who rightly understands the trends in the world. I think the idea of Belousov that Russia was not going to profit from general globalization, that general globalization would not happen, that the West would be hostile, that idea was right. And it was proven by the experience. So in that sense, I think the choice of Putin is like, pick up the people who made the right predictions before, right? If you pick up these people, you're going to be prepared for future trouble.
Okay. Well, Dima, thank you very much for giving us your time and providing us with so many excellent insights. Really appreciate it. It's a breaking news story. We're all trying to make sense of it. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
And remember, if you like The Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.
See you, my friends. Bye-bye.